Welcome to the Clean Hits Hockey Podcast. And just because the draft is over, that does not mean we will stop nerding out about prospects. So, joining us is one of the most respected voices in the hockey prospect world, a man who doesn't just scout tape, but tells the full story. Known for his epic deep dive features at The Athletic, profiling hockey's most interesting prospects, his year round draft coverage is unrivaled. It's our pleasure to welcome to the show, Scott Wheeler. Scott, it's great to have you. For new listeners here in Utah, would you mind kind of just sharing what sets your work apart from kind of that typical draft coverage where it's little blurbs and rankings and kind of all the little tidbits rather than what you do?
Yeah, well, thank you for the intro off the top.
Yeah.
My work is sort of twofold. There's the reporting side of it. I'm a trained journalist by trade. I went and graduated from journalism school here in Canada at one of the big journalism schools in the country, at Carleton University. And I have a reporter background. I worked for the Toronto Star and the Toronto Sun briefly, and the Globe and Mail, and sort of the big newspapers in the country. I did news reporting and crime and wrote about the legalization of marijuana and the housing crisis. And so I'm a reporter by trade, but I've also covered hockey now for coming up on close to 15 years here. And I'm in my 9th year at The Athletic. And my job, obviously, the typical sort of prospects writer role that's played in the hockey world is rankings. And while I certainly do a lot of that at The Athletic and have my top 100 drafted prospects ranking coming out here shortly, which is a big annual piece that I work towards. I also do a lot of reporting, and my work, even the scouting side of it, is heavily sourced. So you'll see constant sort of insight from the coaches of these kids, the general managers for their club teams, their strength and conditioning coaches that they work with, their family members, the people that have coached them growing up. I try to make all of the work I do at The Athletic sort of the most well-sourced work in the space online. That's kind of the end goal. I want it to be insightful, and it's my own work, but I heavily rely on the people who know these players best. And I think that's the best way to do this kind of work, both on the ranking side and then obviously on the storytelling side. I love the storytelling side as much as the scouting side. I'm lucky at The Athletic. Obviously, I have a dedicated travel budget every year, so I'm at every major event on the prospect calendar. I hit college games, I hit junior A games, I hit major junior games. Anytime there's a tournament or event over in Europe, I'm there. Frozen Four, Memorial Cup, Hlinka Gretzky Cup, World Junior Summer Showcase, selection camp for the World Juniors, U18 Worlds, you name it. I'm in the rinks. I'm talking to everybody who's involved on the NHL side in terms of scouts. I'm talking to the players. I'm talking to everybody around the players, their agents, you name it. And the goal is to make our coverage at The Athletic the most comprehensive coverage of not just on the analysis side, but also on the reporting side.
And that obviously stands out in a big way in the work that you do, especially I love reading these deep dive pieces where you get really where the prospect came from, who's responsible for his upbringing and how he's been trained as a player. Really getting those deep insights from his support group and everyone around him, which accentuates what you can see on the ice with your own eyes, right? Like I watched Caleb Doy all year on CHL TV. I pretty good read on who the player was. I watched all the international tournaments, but in reading your profile, which was absolutely phenomenal, it really gives fans a look beyond those highlight packages, beyond what you can see on the TV screen. What was your biggest takeaway in researching and reporting on that Caleb Doy piece?
Well, the first thing that I think you guys will quickly get to know about Caleb is that he's just got this light about him, and that forget the hockey player, just the kid he is, the way he carries himself, the energy he has. He's not your typical hockey player. I speak to probably close to 100 players in every draft class ahead of the draft every year, and a lot of them talk the same, a lot of them carry themselves the same. Caleb is different, and I mean that in a very, very positive way. He just has this, it's almost like this aura about him. You don't feel like you're talking to a hockey player when you talk to Caleb. I think that will serve him very well. I never got ever got the sense over the last couple of years talking to him at different events and on the phone for my feature that I did on him, never got the sense even a little bit that he was cocky or arrogant or some of the other sort of things that obviously a lot of hockey players get talked about. Um, some of the stereotypes, if you will, about hockey players. He's not that. He's like a breath of fresh air. So that was the first thing that I really learned about Caleb. I've known the Desnoyers family and their story for a few years here. I did a feature on his older brother, Elliot Desnoyers, who's obviously was drafted by the Philadelphia Flyers and has played within the Flyers organization over the last few years. So when Elliot was in Halifax and was the captain of the Halifax Mooseheads, I got to know him and his story a little bit. There's a lot of Elliot and Caleb and Elliot as well. They're both great kids. They've both been captains up levels. They both are talked about as sort of detail-oriented two-way players, committed on all sides of the puck. And that's the other big thing about Caleb is that on top of being one of the more talented offensive players in the QMJHL this year and one of the leading scorers in the QMJHL this year, he's also an excellent two-way player. Obviously, I got into the wrist injury and all of that in my reporting on him this year as well, but Caleb dealt with 2 wrist injuries dating back to the CHL USA Prospects Challenge, which was in November in London and in Oshawa. So played through that all year, stopped taking face-offs despite starting the year as a 65% face-off man in the QMJHL and one of the best face-off guys in the QMJHL. Just a lot to like about Caleb. I don't think he has, like, we're not talking about a kid who's going to be an annual lead your team in scoring type. I don't think Caleb is going to be a 90 to 100 point player in the NHL. I don't think he's that. But you hear things like Jonathan Toews thrown around, and while that's extremely lofty, and Jonathan Toews is going to be in the Hall of Fame when it's all said and done, I can see some of those parallels. He was more productive than Nico Hischier and Pierre-Luc Dubois, who are both top 5 picks, obviously, and Nico's gone on to become a captain in the NHL. He was more productive than both of them this year in the Q. So a lot to like. I think he's going to be a excellent 2C at minimum. Could he become a 1C in an organization that already has Logan Cooley? I think probably not.
Yeah.
But I'm a big believer. And if Logan Cooley and Elliot Desnoyers are your 1-2 of the future, I think that's a 1-2 down the middle that you can build a contending team around.
Yeah, and you even see it with the Devils, and Hischier's such a great comparable or an example of how these kind of different dynamics of centers can work, because there's lots of times you'll see Devils lines and Jack Hughes maybe on that second line, and it just kind of depends on maybe the opponent they're playing, the type of role and minutes that they need to be providing to the two-way center in Hischier, and it really does kind of feel like the Utah Mammoth may have secured that similar type of 1-2 punch. Kind of going into Caleb's strengths, what do you see as something that may translate really easily to the NHL, and what components to his game do you feel like he still needs to continue to grow?
Well, the stuff that will really translate is the attention to detail, the habits, the play off the puck, the smarts on the puck. He's got legit skill and playmaking, but the defining quality of his game offensively is just the way that he thinks the game out there. And by and large, the best players in the NHL all think it at a very high level. The kids at lower levels who dominate on one attribute, whether it be their shot or their hands or their physical makeup, those kids often actually struggle to dominate in that same way at the NHL level if they can't think it. Caleb maybe isn't the biggest or strongest or most powerful player. He maybe doesn't have the hardest shot or the quickest set of hands in his age group, but he does all of those things at a very high level. He still has room to grow and fill out. I quoted his strength and conditioning coach in my feature on him, obviously, but still a pretty lean kid for 6'2", 6'1.5", 6'2". So probably going to be able to add 10 or 15 pounds before he gets to his NHL playing weight here. We'll see whether that's impacted by a potential operation or procedure on either of his wrists this summer. I think they're still sort of navigating that in terms of what the best path forward is for his wrist. Do you let them heal naturally and sort of leave it be? Do you get ahead of it and do some kind of a procedure now? What does that look like for his summer and the start of next season? Where is he going to play next season is still up in the air.
Yeah.
NCAA programs obviously heavily recruited him. The Moncton Wildcats and their owner, who is a bit of an oil magnate up here and a billionaire in Canada and one of the wealthiest people in Canada, but Mr. Irving kind of got ahead of it at their parade for their QMJHL title this year and announced that Caleb was going to be the captain of the Moncton Wildcats next year before Caleb had actually made a decision on whether he was going to return to the Moncton Wildcats. I still think returning to Moncton is a great setup for him. The McDougals, who are the head coach and general manager there, Gardner and Taylor McDougall, are first class. They're an extremely, not to use an oil pun, but they're a well-oiled machine as an organization. Obviously a very wealthy organization in the junior hockey landscape. They play at a phenomenal arena at the Avenir Center and have great facilities. They are a perennial contender in the QMJHL. Lots of reasons that he could and maybe should go back there next year. I think college could be a really potential positive avenue for Caleb as well, though. So I don't think he can lose with whatever he does next year. I know he told me he wants to be one and done with whatever avenue that is. So whether he's going to college next year, going back to junior next year, his plan and his goal is to play in the NHL in 2026. So still has some decisions to make. The big, in terms of the second part of your question, the big area that he still needs to improve is just the physical side of it, adding some more strength in the gym, and then playing with a little bit more pace at times. Elliot was a bit of a slow player. I wouldn't call Caleb slow. Caleb's a better skater than his brother was at the same age. And Caleb certainly plays with more pace already at the same age than Elliot did, but he's not a burner. He doesn't sort of push and fly his way around the ice like a TJ Ginla does, or like a Max Senichka does, who they drafted with their second rounder this year. Is a great skating 6'5" defenseman. So there are times where scouts just wanted to see him sort of attack more and move his feet a little quicker and that kind of thing. But I think that'll come, and I'm not worried about that whatsoever with Caleb.
Yeah, I think that's all music to our ears.
Yeah. And, with his skinny build, maybe adding some muscle and some lower body strength helps with that explosiveness and being able to get around the ice a little bit better. Muscle is something that, you mentioned Max Senichka. He's a name that caught my eye a little bit later in the cycle, right? After he came over to Portland from Czechia. I was able to watch a few of his games down the stretch. I really liked his playoffs. What can you tell us about him? What kind of a player did the Mammoth get here in Senichka?
Well, he certainly doesn't lack confidence. I remember speaking to him at the Combine and him insisting to me that he was going to be a first-round pick in this draft. Obviously, he goes 46th overall. He saw my eyes widen when he compared himself to Victor Hedman as well. So not lacking in confidence. He believes he's going to take big steps here. And that's the sense that amongst multiple scouts that I spoke to, especially in the second half of the year. I know there was another team prepared to take him right after where Utah took him at 46. I spoke to another team that took someone else with an early first rounder, but Senichka was their sort of debate point there. So there was another team that almost took him ahead of where Utah took him. 6'5" kid, can really skate. He's got more talent and offense to his game than the numbers in Portland indicate. He can handle the puck. He can make the occasional play. He's not going to run a power play in the NHL, but he can play offense, and he can get up and down the ice, and he can play in transition. He'll walk the line, and he'll take a step off the line and try to make something happen occasionally. And I expect that next year we're going to see him take a big step offensively. In Portland. Portland is obviously an organization that has a rich history of developing specifically defensemen under Mike Johnson. They have, you go through the list. Luca Cagnoni obviously made his NHL debut with the Sharks last year, but you go back through Shea Theodore, Josh Morrissey was there. There have been a few players there over the years under Mike Johnston, who's their longtime head coach and general manager, and one of the classiest people in junior hockey. They've got a long track record there developing defensemen. I think they'll develop another NHLer in Max. And anytime you can just get an NHL player in the second round, it's a success. But I think he's got a real chance to play. And when you start to look at what the makeup of Utah's blue line will look like, Dmitry Simasev, Max Senichka,
Maverick
Lamoureux, right? They're clearly prioritizing length. That's the way the game is going now after teams saw the St. Louis Blues win with length and the Tampa Bay Lightning win with length and the Florida Panthers win with length. Obviously, the Colorado Avalanche won with a little bit of a different blue line in terms of the makeup of their group with Devin Taves and Cale Makar and Sam Girard and that side of it. But length is the priority. Length and mobility seems to increasingly be the priority. Thomas Lavoie, who they drafted and signed, is another big boy. Will Skahan, who they drafted a year ago, is a big boy. So they've made it a clear focal point on the back end. Obviously, with Daniil Boot and others, they've got some size up front, but they do skew a little bit smaller up front. Tej isn't a big guy. Obviously, Clayton and Logan aren't big guys. But they've got a good mix now, and I'm really interested to sort of see where they can take it over the next 5, 6, 7 years.
Going back to the 2025 class as a whole, were there any other Utah Mammoth picks that kind of stood out to you? Maybe somebody that was selected in the later rounds that could outplay that draft position?
No, I didn't actually love their picks in rounds 5 through 7. They've always sort of taken some not unconventional types, because at that point in the draft, you're kind of just taking lottery balls, but they've always taken some uniquely weird players in that range. They've tried to, and to very, very mixed results, I would say. But I thought Stephen Hawk, who they took in the 3rd round, was another interesting one. He's a big boy. He can move fine. And he's got a lot of pro attributes, like in terms of detail and the way that the sort of consistent shift to shift work ethic, the ability to play off of his line mates. He doesn't need to have the puck on his stick all game to make an impact on his shifts. Little bit of a low upside player, but I think a higher ceiling player. Like, he's obviously already playing pro hockey. He's a big, strong kid, but I think he probably tops out as a 4th line player in the NHL if he makes it. But if you're getting a 4th line player out of a 3rd round pick, that's value there as well. So I thought Hawk was a legit worthy pick. I think they took him in the mid to late 70s, if I remember the range correctly. And I think he's got a chance to play. So that's a win in and of itself. And between him and Caleb Doy and some of the players that they've taken over the last couple of years, they've got a good mix at the top, obviously, with the Iginlas and the Desnoyers in terms of players who could play in a top 6, but they've also drafted some kids like Beaudoin, another sort of very high floor, but ultimately a low ceiling bottom 6 projection. They've got a good mix of players that they might be able to sort of rotate into the lineup here. And obviously, in losing Josh Doan, they lost another sort of typical classic bottom 6 type of player. So you're counting now on a player like Caleb Beaudoin becoming that.
Yeah. And to your point, they've been able to swing a couple of big deals and dip into this massive amount of picks and prospects that they've acquired in this crazy deep cut rebuild since Bill Armstrong took over. Since that 2021 draft, when they were able to trade up for Dylan Guenther when they didn't have a pick when they woke up that day, right?
Yeah.
What's your read on how this front office has been operating, how they've been navigating this whole rebuild? How does it stack up against other rebuilds that you've covered? And how close do you think Utah is to really turning a corner?
Well, you ask around the league, and there is no management group that gets talked about more in trade conversations. Certainly at the Combine this year, Armstrong's name was the name that came up to me the most often in terms of talking to agents, talking to opposing scouts. He was talking to everybody about anything that he could make happen. I think not that he's desperate to make a move, but I think he wants to move this thing along here, and he's going to explore every avenue. And I would expect that we're going to continue over the next year or two to hear Utah's name in everything that's happening in terms of trade conversations, free agents, you name it, around the league. I think I know they want to be aggressive. I know I reported this coming out of the combine, but I know they've been talking to teams about trying to add another goalie. I know obviously they just signed Carroll to a medium-term contract that keeps him around, but I think they'd like to get a second goalie of that caliber and really have a tandem, have someone who can push and challenge Carroll. When I tweeted that and reported that, I had people push back saying, no, they must just be looking for a backup. But I truly believe they want another legit goalie. And I think they're going to continue to pursue that. So they constantly have irons in the fire, if you will, and they're trying to make a difference here. Now that can burn you, but there are also teams that have done that effectively. The New York Rangers turned around basically a 1 or 2 year rebuild pretty quickly. There are organizations that have done it. Not everybody has to sit in it like the Chicago Blackhawks plan to sit in it, or the San Jose Sharks plan to sit in it. There are different ways to turn it around. Now, there's an argument to be made that they have been sitting in it when you consider the Arizona context for a long time. But it truly does feel like Utah has sort of a new life and a fresh lease on life, if you will, to try to spend towards the cap and to be a legit annual playoff team and sort of go from there. So I think they want to get back into the playoff picture as soon as possible, and that they're done sort of accumulating a ton of assets and sitting on prospects that they'll still bring. Daniil But and Dmitry Simashev are coming in this year, and TJ Ginla will come in the following year. And there's going to be a wave now of these players trying to enter into the fold. Obviously, Tej was impacted by injury last season, but his team in the Kelowna Rockets are hosting the Memorial Cup this year. So it'll be a big year for Tej, and he's got a chance to be a part of the Canadian World Junior team as well if he can stay healthy and get back on track here. So that'll be a conversation that he's in, although this is going to be, I just started putting together our mock roster that we do every year for the big four teams. And this is going to be a very, very difficult Team Canada to make. So don't be surprised even if a player like Iginla, with all of his notoriety as a top 10 pick and being 19 this year, being on the older side of the tournament this year, I still wouldn't be surprised if he's not on that team. So tough roster to make, but there's a lot ahead for him this year, even without the World Juniors potentially. And I think he could be there. There's a lot ahead, obviously, with the Memorial Cup and sort of returning to junior and trying to sort of establish himself as a 100-point guy in junior. I think that's within the realm of possibility here for him. And so some checkpoints for him, but to answer the Utah question, like they want to be aggressive here. That's everything I keep hearing about them.
Love it.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Yeah, no, Scott, thank you so much for your time here. Utah Mammoth fans, if you haven't seen his piece on Desnoyers for The Athletic, be sure to check it out. It's a fantastic read, and you can find Scott's writing on The Athletic, and you can find him on X as well. So, Scott, once again, thank you so much for being here.
Cheers. Thanks for having me. And a number of those Utah kids we just talked about will be in my top 100 next week. So
excellent.
That to look forward to, plus a goalie who we didn't discuss who will be in my top 20 goalies. So
nice.
Excellent.
Thanks, Scott.
Yep.
Thanks,
thank you again. Well, once again, big thanks to Scott Wheeler for joining the show. You can catch all of his written work at The Athletic. He will be having his top 100 prospects list and top 20 goalies list coming out soon. And if you haven't read his Desnoyers piece, you really must. It is just fantastic. Nice long form piece. You really start to learn a lot about his character. So make sure you're following Scott Wheeler on Twitter/X at Scott C. Wheeler, or you can find, again, all of his written work at The Athletic. That was a fun one. We got lots and lots of little tidbits from him. A little bit of a behind the scenes, if you will. We had a lot of kind of follow-up questions about specific prospects and kind of an outline that it almost felt like he had access to our script or our outline.
Yeah, it's true. Yeah, he just kind of blew right through it piece by piece. Yeah, it made a lot of sense the way he did it.
Yep. Some of the pieces I thought were really fascinating. Were obviously a lot of his comments about Desnoyers. And I think as kind of this offseason goes by, we'll probably do our own little bit more of a deep dive about him. And he gave us a hint of where he will be ranked in that top 100.
No, he didn't. He literally told us. We know something the rest of you people don't know. He told us off camera where every Utah player was ranked, and Brad and I know, and Corey and Kenny don't, and none of you people in the Discord know, and you're all going to have to wait.
Yep. But one comment that I thought was interesting was when we did ask Scott about the later round picks, and I think initially we were kind of hoping he was going to give a little sprinkle about every single player Utah took in the 2025 draft, but that was not the case. And I wouldn't say he poo-pooed some of those picks, but it seems like maybe his drafting philosophy differs quite a bit from the Utah Mammoth scouting staff, in which the Utah Mammoth and Bill Armstrong and team have often taken overagers, often relied on the KHL and European leagues to make some of these later picks. And they're a little bit off the radar as well. And it seems like maybe Scott Wheeler doesn't weigh those players as much as maybe some of the more North American skaters that he gets to see a little bit more often. But we've been seeing some success with it. And Trent and I were talking after the Scott interview about kind of how this philosophy's worked. And it seems like it's almost like pipeline management.
Yeah, absolutely. So like, I think with Scott, he likes upside a lot, right?
Mm-hmm.
He really wants to swing big. And I think in describing, how he felt about Stepan Hawk and some of those other selections, he's kind of like, yeah, but I mean, you could get like a good fourth liner out of that. And I guess it's worth it in round 3 or 4 to get a good fourth liner. And I think he sort of talked his way back into describing some of the philosophy, which is just to get NHLers out of these picks. Yeah. And you can be a little bit more sure of that when these are kids who are already in pro leagues playing against men. A lot of times kids who are 19 or 20 years old, when they draft them, they have a better idea of what that ceiling and what that floor is going to be. And I think that in Utah's case, where they have drafted so many kids and there's so few contract spots remaining, it behooves you to go to Europe, where people have pro contracts with other teams, and you're not dealing with the same deadlines to sign them before they have to re-enter the draft. Like we saw Justin Kipke got drafted this year. Utah only had 2 years to sign him. They didn't sign him. He went back into the draft. He got picked up. I think he got drafted in the 4th or 5th round this year. So Kipke's gone. Whereas some of these European players who have pro contracts elsewhere, you can kind of put those guys on the shelf and wait and see what they turn out to be. Right. And in the case of like Yegor Borakov, right, who is an overager, a second time he was eligible for the draft. He's 19 years old. He's an old 19. He's going to be 20 next month. Borakov plays for Dynamo Minsk in Belarus in the KHL with fellow Utah prospect Vadim Mraz. And Borakov is interesting because he had 7 goals in 11 KHL playoff games this year, which is crazy for a draft eligible player. Mraz, who led the team in goal scoring, only had a few goals in those same playoffs on the same team. So you get a guy like Borakov, you're not necessarily in a huge rush to sign him. He's already 19, about to be 20, and you'll have a pretty good idea of who he is within a year or two. It was the same deal with Mraz, who himself, as a 3rd round pick of the Arizona Coyotes, was in his 2nd or 3rd year of eligibility when they picked him. He's 21 now. So you see, every year there's this big competition for who's going to sign the big Russian free agent, right? We saw it with Siplikov. Urin is the best example of this. Every year there's like a new Russian hot name that everybody's fighting over. And it seems like we're always in the mix. We never quite land that free agent. It seems like we're always the 2nd place team on that. So why not spend a 3rd or 4th or 5th round pick on a guy who you think's gonna be that dude in a couple of years and have him locked up for when he is ready to come over? You retain his rights and he's yours for the long haul, right?
Yep. No, I think that philosophy works, especially when you have just the sheer amount of picks that this franchise has had over the past couple of years too.
And it's hard to argue with going to Central Europe and trusting in Teal Fowler, who we were joking when they signed Karel Vejmelka. We were like, okay, so this is Tucson's backup, or like, what is this? Why? Who is this guy? And now look at him, right? He's this huge cornerstone piece of the franchise. We went back to that Teal Fowler well when we picked an overage player in J.J. Moser, who was third time eligible for the draft. And we used a second round pick on him. And I remember our reaction was like, yeah, he seems like a good player. I'm pretty sure you could have just waited and signed him as a free agent, though. Or did you have to pick him in the second round? I mean, and then before you know it, he's on the team playing 20 minutes a night and is later a key piece in a trade that brings you your undisputed number one defenseman in Mikhail Sergachev. So it works. As weird as these picks seem to be, in some ways, they're already paying dividends and can continue to, especially in the long haul as we're trying to manage our 50 contract limit and stagger the way that we infuse young talent into the lineup over the long haul. So it's really a specialized problem. So it's kind of, it makes sense why it's seen as weird, the way that they draft in the mid and late rounds. But frankly, they're in a weird situation. No other team has really been able to stockpile this amount of draft picks. And it was only because of the COVID cap, that flat cap, that we were able to take advantage of cap strapped teams just at the time we were tearing it down, and we were able to acquire tons and tons of capital. And now that we have it, we have to manage it properly. And this capital management problem is not really one many teams have to solve. So it's not really too crazy that we have to come up with some pretty odd ways of managing it, right?
Yeah, no, it's really interesting. And I think later in this off season, we'll do kind of like a trade tree episode, because some of these kind of cap dumps that the Arizona Coyotes were taking at the beginning of BA's tenure as general manager have now kind of turned into what those prospects and picks turned the outcome of all that. And I mean, during the 2021 draft, getting a 2025 third for Andrew Ladd, you were just like, I don't know what this will be, what type of impact it'll have. And now a lot of these have at least have a name stapled to them. So I think we'll have to break that down.
Big names too, right? Like in a roundabout way, we won't break it down now, but in a roundabout way, doing these sort of non-traditional deals on cap dumps or trading away pieces you don't even really care that much about, landed us in no small part Mikhail Sergachev and JJ Peterka, who we basically got for stuff that nobody cared about when we got those assets. Now,
the Nemeth,
right? But by the time they became Connor Geekie and JJ Moser and Michael Kesselring and Josh Doan, it hurt to give them up. But the assets we used to acquire Geekie and Doan and Moser and Kesselring did not hurt to acquire. Those were pretty simple assets to acquire in terms of the cost to acquire. Yeah,
it's a little shocking, and we'll definitely be breaking that down in depth in a later episode. And it makes me need to pop up the good old Grim Reaper BA. So I guess we now know which door this is that he's knocking on.
We're gonna have to replace that with Buffalo.
The additional. We'll need to put a fifth door here with the Buffalo Sabres. So Another comment I wanted to make too. I know I'm going to be too lazy to do this. Maybe I will later tonight or tomorrow night. But I really am interested now of if there are any other NHL teams who have drafted more overager players since 2020 than Bill Armstrong and this management team. So if you're watching and want to do the homework for me in this group project, please do comment on this YouTube or send us a tweet about it if you find out kind of the amount of overagers this team has taken in comparison to other teams and maybe what the average amount is per draft. by a team. I am very curious. If I don't get an answer to this in the next couple days, I will do it myself and let you all know. One other piece I wanted to talk about from that interview, and that is the second round pick that the team took, Max Senichka. I know this is going to take me a little bit of time to get the name down, but lots of praise from Wheeler here. And I know you were kind of high on him going into the draft. We haven't really gotten to talk to you about it, Trent, and your thoughts on this selection, but it sure feels like you moved Michael Kesselring, and then you just drafted the Michael Kesselring clone from Czech.
Yeah, in some extent, right? At least physically, he's the big right shot D who can really skate and move the puck a bit. I don't know that he has Kesselring's shot. He's probably not going to be setting any NHL records for hardest shot or anything like that. But he's a kid who, as I mentioned to Scott, came on my radar late. I think for most people he did. He was playing in Pilsen in the men's Czech league there. Limited action, 16 games, didn't get a whole lot of minutes in the men's league. So it's no wonder he came over to play in the CHL mid-season, which I think was a great move for him. Obviously, I don't think we would have been talking about him in the second round had he not made that move. But he comes over to Portland and immediately makes an impact, and not necessarily on the score sheet. He had 1 goal in 24 games. And then in the playoffs, he had 1 goal in 18 games, right? You did see a steady point production gain in the playoffs. He did put up nearly half a point per game in the playoffs. So he improved as he got acclimated. But what I saw was a big, rangy player who can really move his feet. He's got good all-compass mobility for a 6'5" player. He can move the puck. His gap control and retrievals are all really good for a player his size. He really just eats up ice, right?
Yeah.
So that's really good to see. That's a common thread, as Scott pointed out, with Skahan and Lavoie and Lamera and Simishev. We're obviously building a prototype here. But, as I was watching Radim Murtka, who also came over from Europe to play in the WHL after not being super happy with his usage over there in the men's league, Murtka is a higher caliber prospect, but I found myself asking, especially in watching the playoffs, is the difference between Murtka and Senichka really 40 picks? I don't know about that, man. I think I'd much rather have Senichka and Desnoyers than have, like, say, Murtka and some center who went in the 20s or something like that. You know what I mean? To me, Murtka's a little bit of a reach at 8. I didn't want to say it to Scott because I know he has Murtka really high on his list, but he was talking about Senichka's maybe lack of, like, true offensive upside and maybe not having that shot. Well, I would argue the same kind of true of Murtka, right? So this feels like a better value fit than drafting this type of player in the top 10. And I think that that's something that we managed to do with Maverick Lamera as well, not reaching too high for him, not picking him, say, with the geeky pick. With Simishev, that's a little bit different.
Yes.
He's a different animal. So he's somewhat of the same player type, but he has elite mobility for his size.
Yes.
He's a whole different animal. To me, there's no comparison between him and Murtka. He's way better in every way. So I wouldn't put Simishev in that category so much as Murtka. I mean, even Murtka and Fiddler, for most of the season, I had a hard time deciding which one I liked better. And I think Senichka and Fiddler's probably a coin toss too. So Senichka was my main guy that I was hoping to get at 46. Obviously, there were players I had ranked higher that went day 2, like Malcolm Spence and some others. But realistically, of the guys who might actually make it to 46, Senichka was number 1 on my list. I think I was talking all about him at the draft party the night before day 2, I think, or maybe it was on the Discord or the group chat. I don't know. I was talking Senichka to anybody who would listen. I was just wandering up and down the street, muttering like a crazy guy on the subway, just like demanding that people listen to me about Max Senichka and why he's the ideal Mammoth. So for me, I got the guy I was most hoping to get at 4, and the guy I was most realistically anyway hoping to get at 46. So very, very happy with the draft. Happy with some of those swings that we took a little bit later. I think Borikov is very interesting for reasons I mentioned. Ivan Kachenko, the goalie. I don't know anything about goalies. I don't know about goalies from Ufa, and I don't know about goalies with names that I've never heard of or know how to pronounce. But Daryl Boycer from the Puck Bunker was on this guy early. He's been talking about him for months. He loves the guy, so he was super pumped about the pick, which hell, good enough for me, man. If Boycer's happy with the goalie pick in the 4th round, I'm happy with the goalie pick in the 4th round. What the hell do I know? So talking about goalies, though, Brad, we had a little chat with Scott Wheeler offline about Michael Robel. We've seen some tweets come out about maybe a different goalie in Long Island. What have you heard about goalies today? It feels like this is a theme.
Yeah. So waking up today, there was a tweet that was suggesting, I forget what show it was on. Maybe you can pull it up while I'm yapping on about it. But it was mentioned this morning on a podcast that there were talks between the Utah Mammoth and the New York Islanders around
Frank Saravalli. It was Frank Saravalli.
Yeah. Friend of the show, Frank. That there was talks around the 4th overall pick with the New York Islanders, which we kind of knew during the day of the draft. I mean, Islanders moved Dobson, got 2 later mid first round picks. Lots of chatter that they wanted James Higgins, the local boy, really bad. And I mean, at one point, the betting odds for James Higgins to be selected at 4th overall was minus 400, which essentially means like it's very likely to happen. I compared it to what the series was for the Capitals versus Montreal in round 1. I think the Capitals were like minus 300-ish to beat Montreal. So this would be even more likely to happen than that, which seems crazy. So clearly people were privy to some sort of chatter. And what Frank Saravalli said today was that there was potentially discussion around Ilya Sorokin, the Islanders goaltender, who was probably a top 5 goalie in the league, top 7 for sure. And moving the 4th overall pick for him. I know there was a lot of chatter, especially in our Discord, about Matthew Barzal being that player that could be moved for 4th overall. But this one, to me, makes a little bit more sense, especially because of the JJ Peterka trade happening days before. Getting an elite goaltender is something that Bill Armstrong has been trying to do since he has came over and taken over as GM for this franchise. Whether that was during the OEL trade and rumors with Demko and Swayman.
That was crazy, man. He got so Utah fans may not know, but GMBA got smoke dropped in as GM just ahead of the draft. And OEL, Oliver Ekman-Larsson, who was the captain of the team at the time and had this super long, very expensive contract, was willing to waive his no movement clause.
Just signed an 8-year, right?
Yeah. And it was willing to waive for just 2 teams only, Vancouver and Boston. And when BA took over, Sullivan had been the interim GM because John Shaika literally just walked off the job. Total Coyote situation. This goofball GM who never should have. Anyway, he just walks off the job. They hand the keys over to the AGM, who is Steve Sullivan at the time, who suddenly is negotiating trades for this massive contract and the team captain with a full no movement clause. And then they hire a new GM and he comes in and has to take the reins on the negotiations. And the rumors at the time were that from Boston, he would trade OEL for Swayman. And keep in mind, this was several years ago. So Swayman was just a kid. He did not have the brand recognition that he has now. Similarly with Demko, who again was kind of just a kid, didn't have the brand recognition. Both teams had goalies higher than them on the depth chart. Demko didn't have the injury issues yet at that point. But it was you could have OEL, but I want a goalie of the future. That's going to be Demko. That's going to be Swayman. It didn't happen. OEL ended up getting traded the next year to Vancouver in a package that got us Dylan Guenther. So thanks for that, Vancouver. And then another star defenseman, Jacob Chikrin, wanted out. And BA had to manage that trade request for a couple of years because the poor kid kept getting injured and we couldn't trade it. So it was this super long, drawn out trade drama. He wanted to go to Florida, where he's from. We were hoping to find a place for him in Florida. And what GMBA wanted from them, rumors was Jared Knight. So again, another young goal, Spencer Knight. Sorry, Jared Knight is a failed second-round draft pick of the Boston Bruins from many years ago.
Trent bot data is getting confused. We'll have to
Yes. Yeah, I remember he did not get invited to the combine, which was a surprise, given that I think he went in the second round. He was a type 1 diabetic. Anyway, I know a lot of useless information. Spencer Knight's the goalie in question. And Spencer Knight ended up ultimately going to the Blackhawks for Seth Jones. But point here is BA has long been in the hunt for a top-end long-term solution in goal. We have Karel Vejmelka, who is a very good goalie, and probably never going to be in anyone's top 10 list. I saw some fan poll from JFresh, maybe, where he was rated as the 27th favorite starter in the league among fans. I think he's better than 27, but he's probably not going to be a top 10, top 5 franchise goalie type. And that seems to be what BA has really, really, really been in the hunt for. I think Vejmelka's contract is reasonable enough that, to Scott's point, you could have a 1A, 1B situation pretty comfortably here in Utah. So anyway, I interrupted with the longest interjection ever. I just wanted to add some context to the trade drama surrounding BA's long-standing quest for a long-term solution in goal.
No, and honestly, I mean, there's not too much more to say because obviously the trade didn't happen. We don't have Ilya Sorokin, so for now, Bill Armstrong is still probably trying to hunt down that 1B or that 1A goalie. We don't know which one he is truly trying to. I mean, all indications are he wants the 1A to Vejmelka's 1B. But I think the tweets mostly enlightening that this search isn't over, and despite the contract that was given to Vejmelka, that we're still looking to pad or upgrade or solidify the goaltender position. So something to kind of think about going into this season too.
Yeah, no disrespect to Connor Ingram or to Vitek Vanacek, right? Both of those are just big fat question marks, right?
Yes.
Connor Ingram at one point was the starter and not Vejmelka. Like, Ingram took his job at one point. And Vejmelka didn't get it back until Ingram was unable to play, really. And then Vanacek has had a bit of a roller coaster career himself, and the Coyotes / Mammoth have made a lot of hay over the years, sort of resuscitating the careers of high potential, low results goalies. So it's entirely possible that a winner emerges between Vanacek and Ingram that solves this problem long term, and we can solve this in-house without a big trade. But I just think it's always wise, until such time as that second long-term goalie position has been secured, lock and key, to have your spidey senses up. Be on the lookout for maybe a big swing on a goalie, maybe a Joel Hofer type, one of these high upside young guys who is blocked in the system. Anyways, point being, right now, probably we're not going to see a big swing on a goalie at the moment until we have a few more answers this season. But if that doesn't get fully satisfied, keep an eye out.
Yeah, I would have to agree. And, we've talked about it time and time again, how goalies are voodoo. When we start previewing our predictions for the season, I'll have some opinions on Vejmelka and kind of my expectations for him. But, I know I always I always bring this up. The more teams in the league means there's more teams that have guys who wouldn't even be a backup playing backup goaltender for them. And 2 more teams potentially being added in the next 5 years or so to the league means the goalies are going to get scarcer and scarcer. So I have no problem with a rising cap bringing in another guy with Vejmelka. But I don't believe we will see that happen maybe this season, maybe around the deadline. Obviously, if there's injuries, that's a whole different thing. But that may be the number one item on the shopping list come trade deadline or next offseason. So that will be interesting. And then one other piece of news that we are going to discuss, but before that, I know us at Clean Hits aren't the best salesmen or self-promoting group out there, but I do have to take a second to at least give ourselves a pat on the back. If you want to subscribe to our podcast, you can find us on YouTube, Spotify, Apple. Like, comment, subs, all that goes a long way to helping us grow. You can join our awesome community in our Discord. That's discord.cleanhitshockey.com. We have a huge community there. It's a free Discord. It's a lot of fun. We have game day chats. We have a prospect thread, trade threads. There's so much chatter in there that we rarely can keep up, but all the Clean Hits crew do pop in there and interact with everybody. Tons and tons of great resources in there. We've had a lot of our Discord members posting videos from development camp. So just a really cool way to get more involved with the team and find other hockey obsessed Utah Mammoth fans out there. We do have a special Club Mammoth section within the Discord as well. As if you show that you're subscribed to our YouTube channel, and we probably need to do something else here. It used to be that if you were part of the blog, you would get access to it. So stay tuned, or you can help us out by becoming a super fan on YouTube. Right down there in the subsection, there is that super fan area, which gives you little badges, and maybe that's what we're going to turn Club Mammoth into. And of course, the best way to help support the podcast and the Clean Hits crew is by grabbing a t-shirt at shop.cleanhitshockey.com. We got the brand new Logan Cooley, Joe Cool designs by Donor Nation themselves. We got the Elite Sergachev shirt, of course, the Club Mammoth shirts, which also come in hoodies, and then the iconic Dylan Gunther Costco Club shirt. Tons of merch. We'll have more designs coming out this season, so make sure you grab a couple shirts. Great way to help the podcast. But back to the news. The other piece that kind of came out recently from Elliot Friedman on 32 Thoughts is that Nick Schmaltz is a name he would like to keep his mind on, kind of suggesting that he's not totally sure if there's been too much chatter or how far a deal may be in place, if there is one at all, but it's somebody he's thinking about as maybe a trade chip or somebody that may get moved. And this is somebody we've talked about for over the entire past season. That's one of those guys that I don't believe he is going to be a long-term piece for this team. His contract will be ending this year, so we do have contract season Nick Schmaltz potentially, which could be really, really good on as far as a point production standpoint. But another comment made about the team from Friedman was he'd like to see them become quote unquote more mammoth-y. So bringing in someone like Peterka, who may not be the best two-way player, granted, he's over 6 foot. He's still not exactly a giant player by any means. Maybe Schmaltz is that type of guy that gets moved for a player with a little bit more grit, a little bit more two-way play that can still contribute into the top 6, but maybe is more on the penalty kill side rather than the power play. Any thoughts on that, Trent?
Yeah, I think, if you read Craig Morgan's great piece that he emailed out today too, he's doing a Craig Morgan version of 32 Thoughts in some ways. He's doing just like a weekly thoughts recap on the Mammoth. And there's been some really great information. There's some really heartening stuff about T.J. Ginla's hips, some quotes from the team where they're so elated with the progress that he's made. They seem to be over the moon. He seems to be feeling really good. So that's heartening to see. But Morgan referenced the Friedman quote about Schmaltz, and Morgan has long speculated that there may be something there with Schmaltz because of the expiring contract. The fact that it's aged pretty well. He seems to be pretty affordable. Some skepticism about whether or not they'd actually re-sign him to a longer deal. I'm with you, Brad. I don't think that's probably in the cards for this player. When you look at the mix of the team, the skill coming in, how effective he could be as he slides down the depth chart, he just doesn't seem like your third line guy. And he also seems like maybe there might be some better internal options coming up in that top six. And he's a guy, to Friedman's point, who's not that mammoth-y, right? He doesn't bring the meat, I think, as Friedman was saying. Schmaltz, as productive as he is kind of, he's not an inside player. He's more of a perimeter guy, more of a playmaker than a shooter. He's a guy who back checks really hard in the neutral zone to generate turnovers, but in the D zone against established possession, he's maybe not an elite defender. That effort level and motor can kind of wax and wane a little bit when he's deep in his own zone. So maybe not exactly the picture perfect example of Utah Mammoth winger that you would have in mind. The challenge in moving him, I think, is just that there were some options out there that I thought were more mammoth-y and would have been a good fit. Maybe a guy like Mason Marchment, but the teams that are moving these guys don't want any salary back. You know what I mean? So who's in the market for Nick Schmaltz, who's a 60-point winger on an affordable contract, that has a bigger winger that maybe could be more of a second or third liner, who's maybe more of a 40-point guy or a 35-point guy? Who's in the market to upgrade that to a scoring winger? It makes finding a trade partner, I think, a little bit more difficult. So as we look around the league, I don't know, have you got any ideas in mind of a more mammoth-y fit from a team that can actually afford to take Schmaltz on?
Yeah, I have some ideas. And again, I'm fine with having Schmaltz on this roster until the last game of the season or postseason.
Yeah.
I think letting him walk in free agency is fine. It's not like we need more future picks, especially considering they potentially got another second with Matthias Michelli going to Toronto. We already have 3 seconds next year, 3 thirds next year. That's tons of assets. Whether you use that trade deadline to move up in the draft, however you want to use it, you have assets. So I have no problem if we lose a 60-point winger to free agency. That the goal shouldn't be to move him just to move him. The goal should really be to get a player that fits the mix better and brings elements to his game that we don't necessarily have. And when I look at some teams that may want that playmaker, that pure playmaker, that have grit to give up, the first one I circle is Boston Bruins. This is a team that has David Pastrnak and then a bunch of kind of 2A players. I know they brought Victor Arvidsson, which I think is going to be a nice fit for them in their top 6, but they have Middlestat, who is playing 2C, Elias Lindholm on 1C. These aren't guys who scream 60-plus points. 2 players on that team that could be a nice fit is Pavel Zacha or Morgan Geekie. Both guys who have probably flourished a bit because of the extra minutes they've had on Boston the past 2 seasons. Because of that lack of skill, is probably 2 players who may not be able to eclipse their point total if they are not on the Bruins. But both I think would be really good fits for the Mammoth as far as maybe more net front presence, good 2-way play, heavy hits. Those are 2 guys I would circle, and you can kind of see where, gosh, move Morgan Geekie off that top line and you have Schmaltz, Lindholm, Pasta. I think this is one of those moves that Boston fans would probably be somewhat amenable to as well. The other team that I would have circled is the Devils, actually. This is a team that seems like they've been trying to figure out how to build out their top 9 and have kind of struggled with chemistry. Now they just brought Connor Brown in. But they have Stefan Noesen, who was fantastic for them. But they've had Timo Meier there since the big trade with the Sharks. He's currently on Daily Faceoff listed as the second line winger with Nico Hischier and Nason, sorry. And then Jack Hughes with Jesper Bratt finally had loads of chemistry this season. But in seasons before, there was lots of line shuffling, lots of trying to make things work. We've seen Dawson Mercer kind of drop down into the third line because of this. We've also seen him play wing when he was drafted to be a center. They brought in Palat two off seasons ago, and he's never really felt like a great fit there. Maybe they need a little bit more playmaking. Obviously, they have that in Bratt, but then they got kind of 3 shoot first guys in Hughes, Hischier, and Meier within their top 6. So maybe it's just a little less grit, which is always kind of an interesting thing to say, but I don't know. Those are the 2 teams that kind of stand out for me.
Yeah, I can see that. I like the Boston fit. I think with them just re-upping Geeky, it probably makes Zacha a little bit more likely.
Yeah.
I think him being a center for them a lot of the times can make that a little bit of a challenge. They may value that, especially after having lost Coyle recently. I do wonder if maybe they're going to rely on Zacha's ability to play center a little bit more. They do have Geeky who can kind of fill in there too. So that's interesting.
They did bring in Middlestat at the deadline.
That's true. They've got Middlestat there now too. That's a good point. So yeah, potentially I could see Zacha being a good fit. He, unlike Schmaltz, has 2 years left on his deal. I think with the Devils, man, that's a hard one to figure out. There's a little bit of a mishmash there. Like you can't who's working out, who's not working out, what's really happening there. There's such a roller coaster of a team. That one's hard to figure. I'd like to dive into that one a little bit more and give that one some thought. I think another team where they're looking to load up on picks, and yet weirdly looking to stay somewhat competitive is the Pittsburgh Penguins. Because they have Sidney Crosby there, because they have Geno Malkin there, they don't seem intent on burning it to the ground. At least they're not willing to trade those guys. And yet they're at the same time recognizing that they have to stockpile picks. They have to build toward the future. And they've been doing that all while kind of keeping these legends of the game in the lineup. I do wonder if Schmaltz being a few years younger than Rickard Rakell might be of interest to them, especially since you mentioned we've got 3 seconds and 3/3 next year that I'm not particularly attached to. I'm happy to get rid of him. Rakell's a little older than Schmaltz, but he does have an extra year on his contract. So I know I'd much rather have Rickard Rakell, who's a bigger player. He's an inside player. He's more of a goal scorer. He does throw the body around a lot more. He's more of a hard-nosed scoring contributor. If you package Schmaltz up with some of those picks, does that get Kyle Dubas's interest? Is that a way to sort of assuage Geno and Sid that you're still bringing in skill? You're still bringing in a 60-point player, just a little bit of a younger one. And you're also, stockpiling picks for the future. I could see Rakell being a very nice mammoth-y player to please Elliot Friedman and bring the meat. Yeah.
Yep. Yeah, no, there's a couple interesting teams. And then there's some teams that have had seasons where they need to improve, but with the way free agency worked, especially with the Panthers being able to lock up not one, but all 3 of those key free agents, probably are disappointed with their offseason. And the one that pops up the most to me is the Detroit Red Wings, whose big free agent acquisition was James Van Riemsdyk. And again, I kind of look up and down that roster and, man, a little more skill could go a long ways for them, because right now they have JVR lined up with Dylan Larkin and Lucas Raymond on the top line. But this is another one where it's a little bit trickier of what piece could you kind of shake from them. Could that be a Andrew Kopp get out that contract or a Comfer and maybe open up a little bit more space for some of their younger players to come in eventually, while also injecting that skill right now. Because I look at that team and they're desperate to make the playoffs, and I don't see it with this roster.
Yeah, and they added Mason Appleton too, which kind of goes along with the Cop and Confer ads of a couple years ago, and Ben
Gibson's
Sherratt's
the big goalie pickup, and who knows where he's at this point.
And they still have Cam Talbot, who's 38.
Yes.
Yeah, what the hell? What is going on there?
You know what's going on is the Iser plan has backfired, and he decided to go out and get 1/3 of the past two free agency classes, and just completely filled that roster up with third liners or
Kane,
second to third pairing guys. It's very strange.
36, yeah.
One other team that's somewhat interesting too is the Kings.
Yeah,
that was a team that I would argue got worse. That's a team that has a lot of grit that could maybe use a little bit more skill. I mean, they have the Warren Fogle, Philip Denault, and Trevor Moore third line, but maybe they need a little bit more playmaking. I mean, I see Kuzmenko, Kempe, Lafreniere, Kevin Fiala all in the top six on the wing, but it's a lot of shoot first guys.
I'd take Fogle for Schmaltz. I mean,
same.
Fogel's had 20 goals the last two seasons, 41 and 46 points respectively. So there's going to be a big downgrade there. And I think Schmaltz will put up points in LA. So if points is what they need and offense is what they need, I would do that.
Yeah.
And then I don't think you'd have to add to get him, which is the nice thing. He's got a modified no trade with 5 teams. Probably that's just Canada. Raquel has an 18 team no trade list. So again, it's probably Canada, Columbus, and Buffalo.
Okay. Oh, 8 team, not 18. That's like, that's how did they get that one?
No, 18. So there's an 8 team for Raquel, who I think if you want to add picks, you could get Raquel. If you don't want to add, you can probably get Fogle just for Schmaltz. So I think those are exactly the kind of guys. I mean, it's hard though, because Utah had a fairly low ranked offense last year, bottom 10 offense in the league. So you add Peterka, which is exciting, and you're happy about it. But that's really the only offense they did add. You're really counting on Cooley and Gunther just being a year older. But if you take Schmaltz's 60 points and you remove
you're
20,
also getting you're also going to get 60 games more of a puck moving defenseman in Jersey to help the transition game and to help the
power play. Yeah.
So between that 12 months of progression with Cooley and Gunther, the addition of JJ Peterka, hopefully another step forward with Hayton's offensive production. Less line shuffling. I felt like there was lots of line shuffling last year. And don't forget, Cooley and Gunther missed double-digit games too. And then you have a blue line that had 12 different players on it throughout the season, probably struggled to find chemistry with pairs. And out of that mix, you had Sergachev, who was having to concentrate a little bit more on the defensive end of his play. Kesselring was kind of the guy who may have opened up offensively a little bit and grew into a little bit better of a transition player. But that 60 a full 80 games, 75 with maybe a couple dings and bumps to Jersey throughout the season. But pretty much a full season of Jersey this year, I think, is going to go a long way, especially with the makeup of that forward group. I really don't think we got to exploit our speed enough last year because of it. Great point.
But with say, options like Fogle or Raquel, right? I still think I'd rather just like spend the picks and get the more effective player. You know what I mean? Just because it just feels like, in as much as we can count on these things to improve the overall offense, downgrading, I guess you could say, from Schmaltz to Fogle, at least from a production standpoint, just feels like not the direction the team is going, But
Agreed.
upgrading from Schmaltz to Raquel and getting the increase in production on top of everything else that he brings, I could definitely see the team doing. It's just a question of, does Pittsburgh want to hang on to Raquel and sell him at the deadline for packages that include first-round picks? Or would they rather get Schmaltz to kind of fill that role now for a season and audition him and get a package that only includes second-round picks? So obviously I'm not giving a first for Raquel, especially not if I'm adding Schmaltz. So I guess it comes down to price tag a little bit too.
Yep. Yeah. Interesting options. And again, I'm not going to get too invested in this. I would be more than happy to just have Schmaltz on this roster for the entirety of the season.
Totally.
Yeah. So I think for the most part, this team's probably, we're looking at the roster, maybe another depth forward, but I think we're pretty much locked in. Of course, maybe there's that curveball of getting that 1B goalie, as Scott kind of hinted that they may be still looking for one, but time will tell. But yeah, we're about to get in the dog days, which means we're probably going to be making lots of lists over here at Clean Hits, rankings, finding ways to twiddle our thumbs and pass the time. Anything else you want to comment about today's topics, though, Trent?
Yeah, I think I can't wait to get my top 10 list of potential PTO camp invites together. You know, we could do maybe 2 hours breaking down the best available free agents who aren't worth a contract and see who we might invite to camp. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, well, we always love our community too. So if you have a good episode idea, let us know in the comments, or of course, join us in our Discord. Let us know what you think we should be talking about. We have some ideas, but October's going to come quick, but it's also going to drag on a little bit here in these next couple of weeks, I think, when the hockey world gets really quiet. So, but yeah, that's kind of all I have. Got some more fun stuff coming up, and like we mentioned, lots of rankings and lists. We'll definitely be doing that trade tree episode too. But yeah, give us a like, subscribe. That's all I got, Trent. How about you?
That's it. Thanks, Scott Wheeler. Appreciate it, man.
Yep. All right, everybody. Have a good one. We'll catch you later.
We know we running it now. Watch the game change. Watch the game change. Watch the game change.